Well, the first thing that probably would have struck the hearers of this parable in Jesus' day is the unbelievable extravagance of the whole story. Extravagant beyond anything that they experienced. Jesus' agricultural yield numbers here are just completely out of control. For reference, in Jesus' day, a farmer could expect probably about a yield of 7.5. So plant a bushel of wheat and get about 7.5 bushels in harvest. Maybe, in a really good year, good soil, you might get 10. So when Jesus quotes 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold as the harvest, that would have just blown their little minds. That would be something completely beyond anything that they could even imagine, that nothing like that had ever experienced before. And to put that in context, even today with modern farming methods, a wheat farmer here in Kentucky can probably expect about 40 to 1 yield on harvest. Corn in Kentucky, maybe 50 to 1. So Jesus quoting 100 to 1 would have farmers all over Kentucky line up to get his consulting services. But that's not the only extravagance they would have heard. They also would have heard the extravagance of the farmer, of the sower. He's just scattering seed everywhere, generously, extravagantly throwing it. He's not just putting it in the best soil, the soil that would expect to yield the best crop. He's throwing it on the path. He's throwing it in the weeds. He's throwing it in the rocks. He's just scattering the seed generously everywhere. As if he somehow knows that even under bad circumstances, some of that seed may yet be able to sprout and grow. So the people in Jesus' day would have then heard this as an invitation to extravagance, an invitation to the extravagant gifts that they could expect in the kingdom of heaven. This is Matthew's gospel, so we're talking about the kingdom of heaven. And they would have seen this as an invitation to share in the extraordinary graces, the extravagant benefits, the extravagant graces of the kingdom of heaven. They might not have exactly understood exactly what those graces would look like, what that actually would be, because they still have a lot to learn, but they would have certainly seen this as an invitation to participate in that extravagant blessing. For us today, that invitation may not seem so inviting, because we live very controlled lives. We're very much in charge. We're going to make sure that we understand what's happening. We want to make sure our very carefully curated lives are always under control. We don't want to get into our heads. We want to make sure that we always understand exactly what's coming. And the extravagance of this harvest seems just a little bit unregulated, maybe. Because, see, fact is, we know more about what Jesus is talking about than they did. This is just in chapter 10 of Matthew's gospel, so they're not even halfway through. As it happens, we've read all of Matthew's gospel. We know exactly what Jesus is talking about. We know what he's up to. As usual, he wants to break into our very controlled, very regulated, very curated lives in order to make a mess of all of our plans. This extravagant harvest that he's talking about is a harvest of abundant blessings that will enrich our lives to make our lives full and meaningful, and also enrich and bless the lives of all the people around us. That we're supposed to share that harvest with others. That we're supposed to announce the good news to everybody that we encounter, so that as many people as possible can be drawn into the family of the kingdom of heaven. We're supposed to live our faith in works of service to the people around us, which includes the poor and the outcast and the neglected, but also includes the people just in our own lives who are hurting, who need help, who are just confused and down, and who need advice, and who need comfort, and who need just a hug. We're supposed to scatter the seed, like that extravagant sower, everywhere without regard to where it will fall, knowing that some of the seed that we scatter will indeed yield a rich harvest, some of it will not, Some of it's even going to be thrown back into our faces. So that's what we're looking at. And that's why that invitation may seem a little less inviting to us in our very regulated lives. We may say, got to think about this. I tell you what, let me check my calendar. Got to talk to some people I got to deal with, I got to talk to my family. And I tell you what, Jesus, sounds great. Let me get back to you. I promise, first thing, I will let you know whether I can accept this invitation or not. Does that sound a little familiar? I know it is for me. What Jesus is giving us today is a really good instruction on faith. He wants us to know what faith really means. He's telling us that faith is not just an intellectual exercise. Faith is not just assent, agreement with a set of truth claims. Claims about God, claims about Jesus, about ancient history 2,000 years ago, about what happens at the end of time or at the end of our lives. It's not just a strong conviction about truth claims regarding Christianity. It's not just that strong agreement. Because if that's what faith were, then Jesus would have used a different metaphor. He would have used a metaphor like rocks or like mountains, something that's firm, something that's strong. He would have told us that faith is like Mount Moriah. It's just tall and solid and it's not going anywhere. He would have told us that our faith should be like Mount Carmel. It's tall and it's firm and it's absolutely steady as a rock. He would have used metaphors of rocks and mountains to talk about faith. But here's the deal. Rocks and mountains are dead. Right? We say dead as a rock. That's not the metaphor that Jesus uses. Instead, he uses a metaphor of plants, of growing things, because our faith is supposed to grow. He uses the metaphor of plants that have deep, strong roots that dig into the soil in order to extract all the nutrients and all the water. He uses the metaphor of plants that have strong stems, strong stems that can hold up a great amount of weight, that have these beautiful, luxurious leaves that keep getting bigger and better, soaking up the sunshine. That's the metaphor that he uses. He uses a metaphor that's growing and thriving and getting bigger and bigger every single day. And the deal is that anything that's like that, plants that are like that, they can't help if they're that healthy and that growing and that beautiful, they can't help but produce a rich harvest of seeds. That's what the plant is for. And that means those seeds are going to go everywhere. Those seeds are going to be scattered far and wide. That's the metaphor that Jesus is giving us for faith. And so it sounds like we've got a choice. Either our plant is going to be, our faith is going to be growing and luxurious and exuberant like a plant, or it's going to be dead like a rock. Sounds like those are our choices, not much in between. Because see, we know what Jesus is talking about in this rich harvest. We've read not just the Gospel of Matthew, we've read all 4 Gospels. And we know what the harvest is that he's talking about. Because there are 3 things that last. 3 things in that harvest. Faith, hope, and love. Those are the 3 things that last. That's the harvest that he wants us to bring in. He wants us to bring in faith. In a post-faith world that has forgotten how to believe in just about anything anymore. He wants us to bring hope into a world that's empty and distant and disconnected and turmoiled and troubled, and that has utterly failed to give our generation a reason to go on, a life of meaning and purpose and love. In a transactional, zero-sum game world that's forgotten about the love of the Father who loves the world so much that he gave his only Son so that everyone, absolutely everyone, will believe and have eternal life. That's the rich harvest that he wants us to bring in. That's the rich harvest that we're invited to share, to have for ourselves, for our own strength, and to share with everyone around us. Faith, hope, and love. That's the harvest that he needs. Now, one other thing. He talks about harvests and he talks about grain, but he also talks about the soil and the different kinds of soil that yield different kinds of harvests. The deal is, he's not talking to the dirt clods. He's not talking to the dirt clods back then, and he's not talking to dirt clods today. He's talking to us, human beings who have intellect and free will. And that means we get to choose what kind of soil we are going to be. We're not stuck with the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We get to choose whether we're going to change or not. And I think maybe you, I know I, often find myself hiding behind the rocks and the thorns and the hot sun as an excuse for why I'm not bringing forth the rich harvest that I was designed for, that I'm invited for. I'd like to be able to do that, but I've just got so much on my plate right now. There's a lot of stuff going on at work, and there's financial constraints that I just have to deal with, and I'm just so busy. And, I just didn't really have the kind of upbringing for this. This is not something that my family has always done. And by the way, I have indigestion all the time and my back hurts, and on and on and on. We tell God, I would really like to love you with my whole heart and my whole soul and my whole mind and my whole strength. And I would really like it if I could love my neighbor as myself, but I am stuck in circumstances beyond my control with rocks and thorns and hot sun, and I just can't get to it. And Jesus says, seriously? Really? Is that all you got? Are you ready to be free of all the excuses? Are you ready to throw off the shackles of the things that you can't control and change into the kind of rich soil that I made you for? Are you ready to do the things that you know you need to do in order to cultivate a rich harvest of faith, hope, and love? Are you ready to be a human being with intellect and free will who can decide for yourself what kind of soil you're going to be and what kind of harvest you're going to bring in? Because if you are, if you're ready to be the saint that I made you to be from the very beginning, then now is the time. Today is the day, and I can help you with that. That's what Jesus is saying to us. Parables are always tough. They're always difficult, and they're always dangerous. And this parable is no exception. It's particularly dangerous because we underestimate it. We've heard it a million times. And because Jesus gives us the answer in the back of the book. He tells us what each thing stands for. But unfortunately, the explanation in the back of the book, it doesn't let us off the hook. It only clarifies the choice that we have to make. It only makes abundantly clear the decision that's sitting right before us. What are we going to do with this parable? Is this parable an admonition or is it an invitation? Is it a warning or is it a welcome? Is it a question or is it an answer? One thing is clear. Everyone who chooses rocks and thorns and hot sun will get rocks and thorns and hot sun. And everybody who chooses to be the rich, deep soil that we were all made to be will bring in a harvest, an abundant, extravagant harvest of faith and hope and love. 30-fold, 60-fold, even 100-fold.